High vibes, everybody. I just want to get on here today to make a video about the relationship between humbleness and fear. Because, you hear a lot of people nowadays talking about, just be humble. And, there's even a song about being humble. And, and in that video, that it has it misconstrued because, you can see even in the video how him saying being humble, I believe it's by Kendrick Lamar, is he still out here doing all these other things and trying to pretty much control all this stuff, and people are misconstruing what actual humbleness is and what you should be. So when people talk about being humble, you see from the society's perspective that being humble is you got to make sure that you're not pretty much taking yourself to a point where you're being cocky. You want to make sure that you're humble in the point where you know your place and not to step out of that place. But while that is true, you should be humble. You should also be grateful, because being humble and grateful go hand in hand, and gratefulness can tie into a bunch of things, but that'd be for another video. But you got to be able to be humble about what you have, because you have everything you need. As long as you're flowing with spirit and you're following spirit and everything that you do, then you're going to have that humbleness. You're going to be able to see that, you're just one part of this whole thing. And, you just got to be able to do what you can do in order to be able to move forward. But when a lot of people say they're humble, they're also afraid to step out of that comfort zone and to do the things that they need to do and want to do in their lives and achieve everything that they need to and want to in their lives. So when you're being humble, you got to make sure that you remember that you don't have to, stay in the specific spot where you're in. That's limiting yourself. Don't have that limiting mindset. Don't have that limiting, belief to where you can't go out here and get the things that you need to get or want to get. Because just because you understand that you're a small part of this, part of everything, you got to be able to be humble in the fact that, you can do these things, but don't get too cocky about it to where, your humbleness starts to be tainted. Because once your humbleness is tainted, that's when the ego comes into play. That's when the ego comes in there and tries to change things around and pretty much be like, well, no, you need to stay in your spot. You need to stay in your place, box yourself in and not really, connect and do the things that you need to do. So you want to make sure that as you're being humble and grateful for what you have, still look at your goals and look at where you're heading and what you need to do, is see that, okay, all you can do is take it one step at a time. If you're taking multiple steps, make sure that when you are taking those steps, that you're taking the time to reflect on it and see that, hey, this still is just a small part of what's going on. You're just a small part of what is actually happening, because there's a lot of things going on, and you got to make sure that you remember the bigger picture and everything. And even as I record this video, you hear these sirens and stuff going off, and, that's like one thing where, like, when the sirens are going off and everything, it's like, it's like that alarm system. It's trying to say, it's like a warning. But that's for another video there. But you want to make sure that as you're being humble, that you're not afraid to do what you got to do, because humbleness and fear can play hand in hand if you let it to, or if you let the ego play into it. So you got to make sure that you don't get fearful of stepping out of where you're at and what you're doing in order to achieve your goals. Because a lot of people, once they become humble, they're also afraid to speak up and to speak what's on their mind and what's on their spirit, because they feel like they just need to stay in their place. But you don't have to just stay in your place. You can get another place and keep moving on and expand what your place is until you're in all kinds of different avenues and venues in your life. And you're able to do a lot more and achieve a lot more than what you were able to achieve before. So don't be afraid to take those steps. Be humble. Yes, be humble in what you have and what you're doing. Knowing that you're taking these steps and that, it may not be the biggest things going on right now. But at the same time, you can't be afraid, because that fear is going to taint it. The ego plays with fear. Fear is one of the ego's main tools, because it makes you fearful of doing the different things that you want to do, fearful of the ways that you're going to be able to achieve, greatness and success in your life. And you don't want to be fearful. You don't want to have that stuff in your life, because once you become fearful, and once you become afraid of what's actually going on, that's when you start limiting your mindset. You start limiting your spirit. You start limiting your physicality. You start limiting all 3 points of the Trinity there. And you should have your Trinity in full motion, spirit, mind, and body, putting spirit first, and then get your mental game in order, and then get the physical game in order. But when you start dealing with that fear, It'll start trapping you in the mind where you're thinking all these different things that are going to limit yourself. You're like, oh man, I can't do this. I won't be able to get this new promotion, or I won't be able to get this job. No, don't be afraid of that. No, that's just one example. There's all kinds of examples, and that's for you to go ahead and do your inner search on and your inner working on. And this is something that even you will be working on, constantly. I'm working on it, being humble in the fact that what I'm doing is still just a small part of everything. You can't be out here thinking that, okay, no, just because you're being humble, that this is all you can do. No, don't have that limiting perspective. Don't be afraid to step out of that box, because that box is that limit. That box is that constraint. You don't want to be inside that box. You want to step out of that box. You don't even want to be in the circle and the cycles of everything going to go. You want to step out of that, because when you think about spirit, spirit is shapeless and formless. Spirit does whatever it needs to do, and it doesn't have those limiting perspectives on it. It has a wider perspective of everything. So when you're out here being humble, you should also be thinking of how you're going to make those steps in the now, in the present moment, in order to get there. Be humble in the present moment. Don't be humble thinking about what's going to happen in the future or what happens in the past, and saying that, when you weren't doing these things, that it started to, make these other things happen, because things will happen once you start stepping out of your comfort zone. Because once you're trying to achieve things, you might not be comfortable doing it. And and you don't have to be comfortable. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't be truly fully comfortable doing it until you start to until you not get comfortable, get used to actually doing that. Then at that point in time, then now it's time to take the next steps and move forward. Take the next steps and do what you got to do. So when you're thinking about how you're being humble, just remember that humbleness doesn't have to have that fear attachment to it. You can be humble and not be fearful. And the same thing goes the other way. You can be fearful and then not be humble. So you got to make sure you have the balance on all points of that. But I feel like this is a real big thing that's going on right now, is people are starting to get afraid of what's actually happening and what's going on in their life. And they're not even sure of what they should be doing and how they should do it. So don't be afraid to step out of that box. Don't be afraid to take that humbleness and use that as fuel, as that fire to keep going. You got to be able to control that, and not even just control that, be able to flow with it in order to be able to do the things that you need to do and want to do spiritually, mentally, and physically. So as you're going throughout your day, just remember that you are being humble. Take the time to focus on that humbleness, meditate on it, go within and think about it, and think about the things that you're going to be doing and the things that you can achieve. And don't be afraid, because this fear is going to limit you. This fear is going to stop you from doing the things that you need to do. Don't be afraid, because when you start being afraid, that's when you start limiting your perspective, start limiting your mindset. There's no reason to be afraid when you're out here. There are going to be things that are going to cause that fear to come up, but you don't have to let that fear affect you, because that's just in the mind. And you got to remember that, the mind is just one part of it. And once you have that spirit, mind, and body, fueling everything, the fear would just become a little small part of it. And once you realize that, and you can, incorporate that into your humbleness, then you're going to be able to do a lot more. You're going to be able to achieve a lot more, because you're going to know that, you are able to do these things and be grateful for what you're doing. And I mentioned that quite a few times in this video, and I will make another video on gratefulness, but you got to be grateful of what you have in order to truly embrace that humbleness, in order to be able to do bigger things, because you got to think about it. No matter what you're doing, there's somebody out there doing something bigger, and you can't let that even bother you. You can't let that affect you. Don't worry about, what these other people are doing. Just know that there is more that you can do. There's more that you will do, as long as you keep taking those steps and putting in the work to do what you need to do. And really and truly just embrace it, encompass it, incorporate it into all aspects of your life, spiritually, mentally, and physically. But that's pretty much all I wanted to get on here and talk about today. So peace in and out, my full love, and of course, my highest vibrations and my gratitude.